My name's Robert Young. I'm a planner in the planning. I'm a planner in the planning department. How does that sound revelatory? And I'm here to introduce James Rojas, as he's known as Jim the Red. He was born and raised in East LA. He went to MIT for his education, where he got a master's in both urban planning and architecture, so he can relate to mostly all of us. He's been a community activist with 25 years of planning experience. When I was placed in charge of inviting James, I would send him these lengthy emails enticing him to come here, and he would send me back emails that said things like, fine, or sounds good. And I thought, man, I got to take this guy around Austin, and I'm going to have to talk all day, and he's going to say things like, uh-huh. It'll be like taking Gary Cooper around town. Fortunately, the minute I picked him up, we got right into it. We talked about everything from the 70s Latino movements in LA, grassroots organizing, new urbanism, the changing American city, where activism is going in America, and we had a grand time. We even got pulled over by the cops. So he's seen the best of LA. Although I got a little hint for you. When you get pulled over by the cops, just say, I'm a professor from UT, I'm showing around a visiting scholar, and they'll let you go. I'm just to tell you what I think is incredibly important and fascinating about James's work is that if you look at any planning school brochure or any planning document in America, there will be two standard photographs. The people sitting around a table while someone points to a chart, and then the people putting little colored dots on a list of things to show their preferences. And those are the two incredibly sexy planning photographs. In other words, they're letting everybody know that this is the most boring profession that's ever been created by humanity. James has broken that code and has made planning fun and innovative and diverse and open to pretty much everyone. And so here you have it, the Leonardo da Vinci of planning, straight from MIT. And I'm going to turn it over to him now. So I want a huge UT welcome for this guy, because he's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that was a really great introduction. So the whole idea being a planner is that, how do we create powering communities? And for 25 years I've been doing planning work, and in the last couple of years I opened up an art gallery in downtown Los Angeles and started working with artists. And I was thinking, we have our art openings that we get over 100 people showing up and they're all happy and creative. I thought, how can we create that vibe in the planning process so people aren't our meetings aren't so boring. But I think the basic flaw of planning is that for planners, we study how to read maps, do GIS, look at policy, look at words and numbers, and that's the language of planning for us. But for the public, the planning is a lived experience. It's the visual and spatial language that they encounter every day through their body, through their bodies and their activities. And that's their language of planning. So many times you go to a meeting, you'll have maps on the wall, and people can't read the maps. Therefore, they think, I can't plan. Or they don't know what the numbers mean. I can't plan, but everybody can plan because everybody has these physical experiences. And so how can we take planning from this really kind of boring, putting dots on the map, to kind of really creating power in communities? Letting people know that they can plan, and it does work. So it's about kind of stirring the imagination and getting people to plan. Getting people to plan. This is a project they did in Mexico, in Tijuana. The city was building a park down there, and they were getting really low engagement. So a group of women invited me down there to do some planning work. So I went down there one weekend just to help them out, and we set up. We built this kind of we built this kind of ravine where the park was going to be out of foam core and out of this blue river is actually a rubber swimming pool that we tore apart from we bought at the flea market down there. We set that up, and for 3 hours we had over 300 people show up and build their ideal park. So we gave the city 10 pages of notes for what it was. So the whole idea is to get people. So the whole goal is to really develop deeper engagement. How do we get to people? How do we get to our imaginations? how do we build trust through that process? 'Cause I think for a lot of people, you know, how do we trust each other, and how do we trust government? How do we build that trust with us? And how do we create values? You know, values are really important because values are what kind of lead our lives. You know, we want to go to school, we want to go to have a relationship. So if those are our values, what do we do every day to achieve those values? And planning should be the same way. What are the community's values? Do we value health? Do we value social connection? Do we value environment? And so our everyday decisions should be leading us there. But what happens now in planning, the planners ask the public, what do you want? You know, I want more parking. I want a new car. I want $1 million. They make these big wish lists. It's like Christmas, and therefore nothing really gets done. So we need to take a deeper look and say, how do we value our communities, and how do we make judgments from these values on the everyday level? And also, you want to stimulate innovation. You know, how do we make things that are more interesting, you know, in cities and stimulate the innovative process of people? Now let's do some work in, you know, and I think putting dots on a map or having people write are not very innovative tools. People are going to write, you know, what you expect them to read, and they're going to put dots on a map that aren't really that interesting. I was working recently just in South LA with 80 low-income African American and Latino youth, and it was on park planning. We gave them a PowerPoint on poor neighborhoods of social justice, which they didn't understand. We did a mapping exercise to put dots on the map and tell us we wanted the park. And it was, you know, more trees, more restrooms, more trash cans. But then we had them build their ideal park, and these students were off the hook. They were just so excited to build their ideal park that they were building, you know, the gardens of Babylon. They were building, you know, they're building fresh air. They're building a petting zoo. They're building all these things, and they were tweeting it. They were talking about it. And afterwards, they told us, you know, the students told us, we didn't even know that we knew that much about parks since we actually built it and kind of had it out there physically to talk about it. So you want to kind of stimulate people to get really involved. And then this kind of stimulation will lead to action. Now these 80 teenagers are going to be active on this whole park decision, because now parks are about them. So the theory is that everybody is a planner. Everybody has experiences every day, and that's how. And how do we capture these lived experiences, especially for immigrants and refugees that come to this country that think, you know, I'm not born and raised here, therefore, what can I offer the city of Austin? But everybody can offer the city of Austin. But everybody can offer the city of Austin a lot of different things based on their experiences. So having people share their experiences is a way to get them involved and a way to get them validated that they have something to offer. You know, I did a workshop one time in LA. We had a group of planners, and one planner was from Yerevan, one was from China, one was from Mexico, and they built these memories of home. And it was like, if we could just bring in all your childhood memories to Los Angeles, we have a much better city, you know, because you have different experiences. Also personal narratives, you know, get those out there, because people like to hear stories, and they want to be part of this process. And also it's almost like a civic therapy. How do we get people to kind of sit down and kind of think about each other, about who they are and what they value? So what I use art making as a planning tool. So people can imagine this world. Like, you know, so in art, when Michelangelo, any artist creates art, they first have to imagine it. You know, I'm going to paint the Sistine Chapel. Okay, how do I imagine that to look like? And then they have to investigate it, construct it, and reflect on it. But during this whole process, people's lives become transformed because they're being transformed through this whole art-making process. So how can we, so rather than just putting a dot on the map, how can we take that dot further and get people to actually transform what their lives are all about and how they kind of think about themselves, their communities, and each other? And the next, and the venue I use play as a venue, because play is a very, very safe space for experimentation, for inquiry. You know, when children play with toys, they're thinking about the built environment in their terms. Even though that little kid will never drive a car, or at least he shouldn't drive a car, he knows that a car needs a flat surface to move on. Or they play with dolls, they know that a doll needs some kind of shelter and shade. So they're kind of mimicking the world around them, but in that mimicking process, they're learning about the world around them. So how can we bring that kind of inquiry into the planning process? So again, people are thinking about the built environment in their own physical ways and at a different scale. And also through play, you can also experiment. You know, because there's no right or wrong answers, then you can experiment rapidly. And the whole idea is having people build really quickly so that these ideas are fluid and experimentations are fluid. So you can always you can prototype really rapidly, and also through this whole process, through play, it becomes fun. You want to play, you want to play, and it makes it a lot interesting. So I don't use any maps, I don't use numbers, I don't use words, PowerPoints, no dots and no selfies. Just build with your hands in mind. Because I think, a lot of times people can't read maps. So they think I can't plan or they don't understand numbers. A person, they probably can't tell, 10-story building from 11-story building. So it gets confusing for them. Or words and PowerPoints. So this is what I use. I use objects like this. I use hair rollers, popsicle sticks, anything you have around the house. And also a variety of it, because people like different things. I was in a workshop in Berkeley, and that's a very kind of granola city, and this one person picked up all the shiny things from the object, from, all the Mardi Gras breeds, and said, "I want to make a shiny Berkeley," even though it's not not cool. I want to do that, but that's what the person liked, and that kind of got into the process. I was working also in this, so people just kind of put their own ideas, and these materials kind of stimulate their imagination. Now people are challenged to recreate something out of a hair roller. So now you're imagining what the hair roller could look like, and that kind of really pushes you to think about how imaginative can you go with this process. So you're going to produce innovative ideas just by the materials. If I were to give everybody blocks and Legos, it would create square things. But this way, you capture the way you think about space. And I always and the prompt is always a really simple question: build your favorite childhood memory, or build your ideal park. Something everybody can do, because everybody has a childhood and hopefully has a good memory of it, or not so good memory of it, and people can build, something simply. If you ask people to build, if you ask people to solve the transportation problem in Los Angeles, or build affordable housing in San Francisco, they'll walk away from you because they're just really big problems. But you got to give people a starting point to where you can start from, and then people just build. They build with self-reflection, they build with inquiry, they build with all these experiences and imagination. And they start building the details and memories that matter to them. So as architects and planners, we start thinking about this physical world that people want to be in and what they're building with. So when I work with the kids, I ask them what they like to do in the city, and it's like going to parks and different things like that. And also by using all these random objects, you can also build. People can also build experiences. So I think a lot of times people think that because to play with Legos, that's the way to do it. But I think we need to, because cities are both tangible and intangible. It's physical form, but it's also values and different and non-tangible. So how do we get that to be part of the process? It's the wrong way. So with adults, I have adults again have them build a favorite child memory. This is actually working in East Bay in the Bay Area. This is all in Spanish. This is getting immigrants to build their child memory and talk about health. How would you make a bike plan in East Bay? And then everybody has 1 minute to talk about what they built, because they have 15 minutes to build or 10 minutes to build, and that gives them time to kind of clear their thoughts and have kind of a coherent idea of what they want to say. And everybody present for 1 minute, their idea. This is working in Pittsburgh with refugees, from Bhutan and all different countries, all parts of the world, having to kind of talk about their memories and kind of think about them. And so it happens that people build memories based on experiences that this is a childhood home in Puerto Rico, or it could be or this research activity here. We had in Phoenix. We had the police department working with youth and having it all built together. So the youth saw the adult policemen building cities with them, and now you're kind of breaking down barriers. This is working in Eugene, Oregon, with the Parks Department and how to get Latinos to access parks, or how to get Latinos to access parks in Eugene. And we did this workshop in an ESL class. There was 70 people there in English as a second language class, and it was interesting because we had everybody was building, but we had the mothers and daughters. They naturally form these kind of teams. So the mother and daughter worked together to build their ideal park, and all this data was all collected and was given to the planning department in Eugene, Oregon. And so what happens is people bond to these narratives, because now your story becomes my story. This is a woman from El Salvador talking about her plaza in where she grew up, and this is a woman from Chile talking about her dead-end street in Santiago. But so people kind of break down all the different barriers that people have about in their adult worlds by telling you stories. I just did a workshop in LA where this African guy from Nigeria, he built a beach where he played soccer on it. The guy from LA built a beach-based soccer on it. The same experience, but two different continents, or two different areas. So people start to bond with these kind of experiences. And it also could be used as a way of problem solving. With this activity, I asked women in California, how would you improve family life? And this woman built the border between Mexico and the U.S. She said a lot of people that live in Mexico, they work in the U.S. and it takes them 2 hours to get over the border every morning. So if we had a fast pass, we'd be able to have more family time. So the popsicle sticks represent these represent the border. All these buttons are traffic. This is a U.S. side, this is a Mexican side. So she was able to kind of solve this problem, build it. This idea she had in her head. So now she has an idea of where to go with it. So what this first part does, this first part kind of validates people. Now it kind of tells us where we come from, and who we are and what we value, and it kind of validates people to be in that room. Now you're in the room with people that you know. Oh, sorry. So the first part one, that we just went through, that was the individual activity. It can be used as an icebreaker, reflection, empathy, and validation. And this usually takes between 15 to 20, 30 minutes. Part two is a group activity, because now people are comfortable, they have empathy, and we're all here together. Now they're ready to collaborate, build consensus, generate ideas. And this takes a little longer. It takes so what we do is that people are put into teams, and start doing, it's like teamwork. And this is working in Detroit, working with the African American women, people there trying to figure out how would you improve access in Detroit. It's kind of open into question, what would that look like? So this way, each team can solve that problem, and they can identify the problem, solve in their own terms. So it becomes their problem and their solution, rather than me telling them, improve biking or something like that, but having them improve it, having them interpret the situation, interpret the problem in their own terms. So part two, it's really important for people to collaborate, because we have different experiences, different talents, and we have different perspectives. But together we can be stronger. We can create better solutions by collaborating. But a lot of people don't know how to collaborate. You go to most planning meetings, people say, I have the right answer for LA. I'm going to build, a big rail line, or I have the right answer for San Francisco, and I'm going to sell it to you. But planning is about collaboration, because it's not winners and losers, but it's how our ideas, how our ideas impact others, and that's what we need to learn. And also, how do we negotiate? How do we negotiate, for our different needs, our resources, and understanding how our ideas impact others, because that's the way we negotiate. And we need to that needs to be part of the planning process. But most of the time, when we're dealing with words and numbers, there's no room for negotiation. By having people play and build, they can negotiate through space. So you put the car guy and the bike guy on the same team and have them build their street together. Now they can negotiate with these different issues. And the group challenges could be, really tangible, mobility, urban design, bike, pedestrian planning. There could be fuzzy things like health. Well, what does the health community look like to you, to the team? What does economic development look like to you? How would you create that? How would you create social equity? What do these topics really mean? Or sustainability? So people for each team can build it and define it on their own. This is working in New York City, with the health department. And we had all these architects, designing a health in New York, and their idea was to take Central Park and turn it into an octopus, and have green streets come out of Central Park leading to the east and Hudson rivers. That was their idea of how to do it. And this is working in Northern California after a Zumba class in a park. We asked these women to build a pedestrian, safe, friendly street in their community. And they did it. And they built a street, they built street trees, and they built stop signs. But what they also did, they also built values. What should my street really look like? What should it feel like, and what should it look like? Which is really important, because a lot of times we just ask people what they want. I want to walk a little street. We have no idea what that means. But you start to build it, you start to figure out that, well, they want to have more tree canopy, or they want to have more comfortable space. So they start looking at the kind of the information that we need as planners and architects to kind of build better places. This is working in with women in Pershing Square. So what's good about this method is I can take it on site. This is working with women in Pershing Square, one of the worst spaces for women in all of Los Angeles. It's a kind of a gauntlet. So we took 20 women there and asked them, how would you improve Pershing Square? You know, and they were actually on site and they had ideas how to improve it that were really based on the physical experiences of that square at that time. This is working in Minneapolis with African American youth and teaching them how to do planning. You know, we building these models about, you know, what's interesting about this model is that, well, at this exercise that we asked these teenage girls build their favorite child memory, and their child memories were actually from the South, because every summer they go down to Florida, Tennessee, Alabama to stay with their grandparents. So these are the areas that they had in their hair that they valued as children. So even though they're in Minneapolis, this is kind of spatial dynamics they wanted. So it's interesting to understand this kind of, you know, what people carry in their head. This is working with a bunch of MIT students went to northern Japan after the tsunami. They noticed that in the hotels, a lot of the children were running around there because they had no toys in their homes, but they had their imaginations. So they ran the workshops with the youth in the hotel lobbies, and where they had the students build their ideal cities or places, and then they had them on display. So after people build, again, each team gets to present, you know, for 1 or 2 minutes. This is women this is a Spanish workshop in the city of San Fernando, where these Latino women redesigned Van Nuys Boulevard. You know, they put in bike lanes, they put in street trees, they put in lights, they put in benches, they put in civic art, they put in everything that any good urban designer would do, but they did it themselves. And now they have control. It's like almost like children. They have control over, you know, the built environment around them. So like any meeting, you just take notes. You take notes, pictures, and videos, because you can extract a lot of data from these processes. And the whole idea is to get people thinking about, you know, things in really different ways and get different solutions. Again, you know, we built a big model in San Francisco. I'll show you later. So I also build models like this as artists, and this is a good way to get people to engage in, you know, again, also in the planning process. When you don't have a classroom, or you don't have a group setting, but you're at a farmer's market, at an art gallery, at a museum, and this will be up for 24/7. Because as artists, you know, building models, you could do a lot of things. This is Los Angeles, the park, the LA River. This is where the Pasadena Freeway is. So as an artist, I could take out the Pasadena Freeway. I could make a bigger park, make a bigger river, and people can react to that. So how do you push art as a medium to get people's reaction to think differently about the city? This is working in Sacramento, where we built a model, you know, of the region, and had people just play with it and just figure out, you know, what do you want to see in that region, you know? And this is the model I built of Santa Monica. You know, Santa Monica is going to get a metro station or a subway station, and what if we made Santa Monica into a half circle and made it walkable? What would that look like, and what would that be like? But having people kind of respond to the model as the question, and then they can build all our different ideas of what that might look like. This is working in New York City in the Grand Concourse, in the Bronx on the Grand Concourse. This is a 4-mile street, you know, in the middle of the Bronx. You know, we had just people kind of think about what should the Grand Concourse look like if we could change it. So as artists, you know, we could create these pieces that can get people's reactions. So many times I'll put these models on a street corner. This is in Hollywood Boulevard, and you know, people a lot of times like people ask me, am I a street vendor selling something? Are you selling perfume bottles? You know, something like that. But I tell them, no, it's city planning. Well, what's city planning? You know, it's how you could change your community for the better. And then people start figuring out, you know, well, you can change things, you can move things around, and that's part, because people think that the built environment is set in stone and it can't be changed, but it's all very fluid. You want to show people that. This is working in Mexico in a small pueblo where they actually built a model, and they had people kind of chalk out and mark out how would they improve their plaza, you know, in Mexico. This is working in the South Bronx. I was working with 2 artists, and they were really wanting to investigate how the community thought about the Bronx River. So we went to all these laundromats to do the workshops, and but everybody there at the laundromat were mainly from Latin America. So they had no idea where the Bronx River was. They were building rivers from Latin America with palm trees and turtles and sand. So you're thinking about, even the people who live in the South Bronx, their idea of a river is still somewhere else. So how do we, as planning architects, capture these experiences people have in their heads that define these spaces that define these places that they know? Again, this is working in San Francisco, where we built a 40-foot long model of Columbus Avenue. It's 40 feet long. We placed it in Jack Kerouac Alley, right next to City Light Bookstores, one Sunday, and they were having the Chinese Moon Festival back here. So, so we asked people, how would you rethink Columbus Avenue as a space? And so people built beer gardens. They built pond to put in a little water feature. They put in all the different things, to think about it as a public space. But also, and we also gave people surveys to write things down. And in the surveys, people will write in more crosswalks and more street trees, more benches. Something that's very kind of dry, but compared to what they built, the writing didn't capture that kind of energy. Because people aren't going to write, I want to see a beer garden, on Columbus Avenue. That's what they did. So this is a setup in Tijuana. This is where the park is there today, but this is the workshop we did there, in this area. This is working in Raleigh. They were trying to kick off their downtown urban design plan, so I did a model for them, and we put a model out in the street. People could just rethink Raleigh. We had a lot of people working on that. This is working in Eugene, Oregon. I was working with the professor up there, Gerardo Sandoval, and he was really interested in how to get Latinos engaged in planning, in their communities. So what we did, we built these models and we placed it at the local stores. For 3 or 4 hours a day, the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, when people are going in and buying their tortillas and carne asada, and diapers, we just stopped them and they just asked for a few minute conversation. How would you improve your life in Medford or in these communities? We did the same thing in Eugene, where we built a model and we had the students, man it, but we worked at the parks department, and we had the model, in a market, in the lobby of a market. We used to have like 200 people show up there, just these 1 minute to about 5 minute conversations. And we got so much data from the participants. And this is one of the many sheets that we came up with. But all these ideas, informality, safety, security, regulations, stuff like this, are now part of the need assessment for Eugene, Oregon, to get Latinos to use parks more. This is in Chicago, so where the whole idea is that, so you want people to really think about their bodies and space and what they want. This is kind of based on the work of Lawrence Halpern. You get people out there and physically understand what they want. So here in Chicago, I took a group of people out there and asked them in this parking lot, what would you find here that you liked in this parking lot? Because parking lots are probably the most unnatural places in the city because it's just asphalt. So it's very hard to find a place that you like, but when you do find it, you start thinking about your body. And this person picked this green crack in the asphalt where the plants are growing. But everybody, all these folks had very different places that they found, all over the parking lot that they liked, from shade to view to artifacts. But it shows people, how everybody responds differently to the built environment. And this is a project they worked on in LA, where we actually, this is the LA River right here, and we put a big map on the floor, and we had people, find their house and talk about how their house was connected to the LA River. And if we had water, how would the water come to your house from the river? So it was like playing Twister. People were just crawling over this map, trying to find their house and thinking about the LA River. This is a project we did in Long Beach. We built a model with a fellow architect, Giacomo, and the whole idea is how your body thinks about space differently. So what if we built a city where people were worms? And they looked up at the city from below. What would that be like? Just to kind of give them an idea about dimension. Because sometimes if you're high, like if you look at places like the Highland in New York, you one story up from New York City, but that changes your whole experience of place. So how can we get people to understand how your body can really be a tool, for the planning process? This is working in so a lot of times I'll work with low-income youth and have them build models. This is working. This is working again in Minneapolis, showing youth how to build a model. This is working in LA, showing youth how to build a TOD line, rail project. It's in East LA where I took a group of 80 Latino high school students to have design their ideal trying to orientate a district. So we took them on a tour of different rail sites throughout Los Angeles and gave them a checklist. I want you to count the trees, count the benches, count the restaurants, and then they did it and asked them questions like, would you come over here, come in with your friends? Well, how do you like about it? How would you like about it? And then we had them come back to East LA and had them design their neighborhood stations. So they designed stations, they put in parks, they put in stores, they put in everything that East LA didn't have, they put it at the rail sites. And then they built models, and this model they built out of candy. But what's cool about it is that these students were starting to think about architecture and place. Well, what should this park look like, or what should this building look like? Should it look like an Aztec temple? Should it look like some modern building? So you start thinking about architecture and form, and with this space. So it became a very rich discussion about kind of identity of their community. So when you do these exercises, you have to kind of synthesize the information that you get. What does this all represent? What do all these ideas represent? And how do we interpret what was built and said? Because people will build using metaphors. So someone might build, put pillows on Fifth Avenue as a way of saying, I want to make Fifth Avenue a more comfortable place. Or they might talk about, I want to build a park in the sky. Or this one little boy in Boston one time built a skating rink on the roof of the neighborhood. So instead of using the sidewalk to get around, he wanted to use the roofs to get around on this kind of skyway, kind of skate track. But again, he was talking about, looking at the built environment as more active. And then how do we establish values from this whole process? Are we talking about, I was working in Portland, and this whole group, they said, this is our Portland project, and we want to make the river so clean that babies could play in it. So their idea is how they want to make a really environmentally high quality city. But that was the kind of the metaphor. That was the kind of the metaphor they used. And how can we learn from the community with all these different ideas? What's the community telling us about the process? I think a lot of times as planners, we look at numbers and decide to think this is our interpretation of what they need, but we really don't have any idea what they're really talking about. For example, when we worked in Eugene, me and Gerardo are from Los Angeles, and LA is a very, very park-poor city. We get to Eugene, it has tons of parks there. So, but yet, when we did the workshops, Latinos identified that they weren't using parks. We thought, well, why, you have parks here, why aren't you using them? But for us as planners, we thought, yeah, there's plenty of parks here, so I guess parks are not an issue, but it was an issue. So it's kind of digging deeper into how people kind of connect to the built environment, and how we want to kind of have these kind of discussions about, what we need to do. So yeah, so these workshops and models could be used as a way to educate the public on planning, just as a simple, come to my kindergarten class and show my students planning, or it could be a way to inspire participation. We want to get more people back to the meeting, or you could kind of create the planning capacity. What does planning mean, and why should it be involved? Or collect data, or kick off a long-term planning process like a general plan or a transportation plan, where people are going to be there for a long time, and how do you kick it off the right way, where you're starting with imagination and then drilling down to values and ideas, rather than having just these kind of really tight framework. So this is a similar approach to participatory planning, public interest design. There's like human-centered design and social practice art. So this is kind of a similar process, but it's only applied to the planning process. So I work a lot with nonprofits, arts, education, and municipalities on this work. Because it's a multidisciplinary kind of approach. He works in different mediums. So I've done over 42 workshops, 75 models, and probably 6,000 participants. So I've kind of seen a lot of patterns in how people think about spaces and places, how children think about space, and how people value the environment around them. In fact, I was talking to Rob earlier, talking about what I do with the first part. When people build their favorite child memory, you start building the same kind of patterns of nature, in fact, physical activity, and places like that. So the whole idea is planners and architects, how do we imagine with the public? Right now in Los Angeles, there's an initiative to stop growth in the next 2 years, by the public. It's kind of a voter initiative, because planners have not engaged the public in the whole process of the future of the city. And I think by allowing people in, it's a really good way to get people, this kind of power to imagine together. This is my website. If you want to hear more about it, this is the work I do. Thank you. questions? Comments? Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of things you showed were seem like kind of one-off events. I'm wondering if there's any venue for more like long-term engagement, and when you go into a city and you do this event, and maybe people have a lot more ideas or want to continue to know what's happening or things like that, and how you stay in touch, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what I do is I train planning departments so they could do the workshops over and over and over again. So I've trained the New York Health in New York City. I was working with the health department in the New York City School District, where we're training teachers how to run the workshops in their classrooms, so that they can work with the students on how to redesign their playgrounds on campuses. So kind of training people on this kind of methodology and approach to get people engaged, and because most of my clients are women, and they really understand this collaborative process, and they kind of do it on their own.
So I feel like in your presentation I heard successful engaging, like community engagement activities, which is great. Um, that's still a struggle in a lot of the projects I've worked on. But how do you translate that information that you get, which potentially very abstract information, into like real recommendations and tangible solutions?
Well, what you do is you create, for the first step is just create values. That's your first list, right? What are our values here? We all build our childhood memories, and what were similar about them, and what are our values about this place. So the values are number one, and then you get your list of ideas. We have 30 ideas here, from the park to the sky to a crosswalk or to a garden. And how do we prioritize that list? We can't build a park in the sky, but maybe we could do more gardens. And as a planner, when you do an environmental impact report, you need to look at all the options. Like if I'm studying transportation corridor, you need to look at all the options for mobility. From hot air balloons to like buses, rail, all the different things. So you need to have them out there, and just say that you looked at them, and then you can prioritize that list. And half of them might be really pie in the sky, but what are these pie in the sky ideas tell us about the community? I was doing a workshop one time in Los Angeles where people were building their ideal imaginary transportation system. Half the people wanted zip lines because they didn't want to harm the environment with mobility. So we thought with zip lines we could just be above it all and not really harm the landscape. So that starts from that process you start to develop values about the environment and mobility. And then from there you can start what kind of projects are going to have the least impact on the built environment through mobility. So that's when you start developing your ideas and your solutions. But you need that list of values, because far too often people just have a long list of things they want and there's no values attached to it.
Do you work directly with other urban planners or architects that you pass this information along to? And are there any projects that are good examples of what you found in your research and how it's actually happening in real life? Is it normally larger scale projects, or is it smaller scale stuff like parks and things like that you take the information and actually implement?
Yeah, it could be. I do work with a lot of planners and architects. Because some people will say this is really great or this is really crappy. They'll say I love it or I hate this.
Yeah.
Some people say come to my city and do a workshop for us and show us how to do this, and we'll do it over again. So they'll carry on this whole methodology, and then a lot of times with women that want to have a space in the planning discussion, because the way it is now, it's all about a shouting match. And if you don't want to go there and argue and fight, you're not going to go to the meeting. So you need a different platform, and then the scale could be different. The scale could be an actual building, park, or it could be a plan. I was working in the city of Ontario, right above Toronto, the county, region of Ontario, on developing the street guidelines. What should their new street guidelines look like? So we had everybody build. We did workshops on streets. From the public to the engineers, what should this look like? And what should we be achieving through our street designs? So it could be any kind of scale you want to do, and plus people, and the whole idea is giving people the option to do it at any kind of scale. People think that people want to create a sustainable world. That's fine. If they want, or a team wants to create a sustainable intersection, that's fine. Whatever scale people feel comfortable working in, I just let them do it that way.
And you've seen projects
this research? Like, if you've seen an actual, like, this street, you know, like, you've gotten information from the people saying,
Yeah.
like, oh, we love a bike lane, and then you've actually seen it happen.
Yeah.
It's more conceptual.
Yeah, no, it happens. Like, I was working on Ciclovia in Los Angeles. That's one of the biggest street parties in LA. And we do workshops like this. You know, what streets would you want to bike on or walk on? And now we have Ciclovia.
Yeah.
But it was a way to get people thinking about, you know, what kind of conditions you want to see in these streets and these projects. And I was working, I worked in Ontario, and I was just working in New York City with the CNU, Congress of New Urbanism, on looking at projects. And we had so many projects from that neighborhood Ontario worked on street design. You know, now morphed into something more, into actual projects. But you need to start somewhere. And you need to get people thinking about how their imagination can kind of create that power. Or sometimes it's just students. You know, I was giving a lecture at a college in LA, and this woman said, "Oh, I did your workshop when I was a teenager. That's why I'm studying urban planning now. Because I learned how I could do this."
James, I would imagine that sometimes playfulness is threatening to some people.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could just give us your thoughts on some of the resistance that you've encountered to your techniques and your methodology.
Well, usually, you know, like older males are really kind of apprehensive because they just see that, you know, I know the right answer, and why should I even negotiate in this process? So they're usually the ones that are kind of hesitant, or people that or NIMBYs that go to meetings, and they'll say, well, you know, I just want to say my piece, and I don't want to negotiate it. You know, so, but usually what happens is that people, it's like going to a party and not talking to anybody. Eventually, you'll start to talk to people. You know, you're gonna sit there, you know, everybody's having fun, right? You know, so usually that kind of breaks them down. It's kind of the fun element of people having a good time. You want to be part of this whole discussion of innovation. In fact, I gave a workshop in Lincoln City in Oregon, and we did it for the Planning Commission. And it's a group of older white males, and but it was their wives that really loved it. They were creating the most innovative idea. They were just all over it, but the men were just like, we can't do this. Even though they're planning commissioners. It was interesting. Yeah.
I'm curious how or if you curate the tchotchkes, like the materials that you bring.
Yeah.
Like, are there some that are like totally inappropriate for certain communities, or some that go over really well with certain communities, or things that people gravitate towards, or you just kind of get a bunch of stuff and bring it and go with it?
Well, that's a good question, because what I find, I've been over 100 workshops, and I kind of see regional differences. So when I do workshops in New England, you know, in that part of the U.S., people love fall. So they'll grab all the orange leaves, and they'll talk about Halloween, they'll talk about fall, they'll talk about raking leaves, smelling leaves, stepping on leaves. You know, it's all about leaves, right? But yet, in Los Angeles, people hate leaves. But people will never talk about leaves. It's always going to the beach or Disneyland. You know, so I always make sure they always have leaves. And also, you know, it's also what people are attracted to. You know, a lot of times, hair rollers are good shapes because they're kind of like, you can play with the hair roller. It could be a tunnel, it could be a subway, it could be a tree, or it could be an apartment building, or it could be a popsicle stick, or stuff, different material that people can interpret different ways. You know, and I think, but just having a variety of things is really important, because people are just going to look at different things that they need.
You mentioned that you're trying to break down barriers. That's what
Yeah.
you're trying to do to avoid conflicts. So
Yeah.
Did you notice that after these barriers are lowered, conflicts reduced? If so, how to resolve them?
Well, I think when people work together in teams, they start to negotiate their ideas, and that's where all the conflict happens, when they're building these models together. And but through the building of it, they can negotiate their solutions. So that's where they get resolved. And then each team will present their idea a sustainable world. And then from there, we kind of go around and have a round robin and say, okay, what did each team talk about that were similar? You know, so you start creating these kind of values of what people want, and that kind of gets everybody on the same page. So, and the whole idea is that, you know, people might think, you know, we speak different languages, we look different, and we're going to be different. But when you start from the childhood, you break down all the barriers. People understand we're all the same people in the core, and then you kind of build from there. So you need that equal playing field.
What's your favorite childhood memory?
Mine, it's probably playing in the mud, building cities. You know, working the sewer with the water. Yeah.
think to build on Anne-Marie's question before, I want to see what this manifests into. And does it ever come to life in the real world? And there are parks that have been impacted.
Yeah.
So I think the focus of breaking down the barriers on it is really wonderful. When people start to understand and appreciate the environment. There are two examples in Los Angeles that I think take what you're doing really to this, we call it professional level, because there's a heck of an economic reward in all of it. There's one project, and you might be familiar, it's called a Blue Zone in the South Bay.
Yes, that'll be, yeah.
There was a gentleman who went around the world and studied where
Yeah.
people lived the longest, and he found these 5 different locations
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they were living. He basically put together this manual, and he
Yeah,
kind of promotes this, and you have to get all these cities on board. And
yeah,
they've actually integrated, bicycle riding and trails, and
Yeah.
living a healthy lifestyle. There's a tremendous amount of money that has to be contributed to that.
yeah,
And then the other one is the Urban Land Institute is, I remember was hired by the city of Manhattan Beach for $250,000 to come in with a bunch of architects for a weekend. I think they studied the project for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And they came to the table and said, this is how you should modify your downtown in terms of
Yeah.
parks and layout and all that.
yeah,
So it's kind of a master plan, much in the way that you're doing this.
yeah,
Okay, but there's this big dollars at stake where these communities need a neutral voice to talk about it. Because very often that older guy
Yeah.
in the room that doesn't talk to me is so bogged down in all the rules and the liability that they're kind of paralyzed.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
can't move. So there's actually a process out there
yeah,
similar to this that has all these professionals that has a huge impact.
yeah.
And I'm wondering how how to make the jump from this to that, or maybe that's on the horizon.
No, I actually did work at the Blue Zone. I actually worked with the Blue Zone in Hermosa Beach. I built models for them. You know, they're having these big public outreach meetings about biking and healthy living. And I built these models for them to talk about how would you make a healthy, Hermosa Beach or Manhattan Beach. So people actually build these models that talked about health.
Do the politicians listen?
Yeah, I think they listen because they want to know what their constituents think. And they want to know what people are thinking about and how do we move this forward. And I think the problem is that people are really afraid of public engagement. So they really kind of have these kind of barriers between it. But when you have this open process, people just see how naturally it flows out. And there isn't any kind of you're not pushing any agenda. It's just kind of how people think and how they can understand their constituents. Yeah.
Very often planning projects will take place in a very difficult context. Say you're trying to design a park, but the larger issue is the displacement and gentrification that's happening around it.
Yeah.
How do you see people dealing with those larger contextual issues within your process when you're trying to focus, say, on a street or a park?
Yeah, I think with all the displacement going on there, it's important to realize what are your community values. What's at stake here. I work a lot in East Los Angeles, a lot of displacement, and I did a lot of research on that. So what are the values in that community that we need to preserve, at least halfway, to stop gentrification and kind of preserve the context and integrity of the community as, all this informal activity happening? How do we go and say, what are your values here, and how do you start to preserve it in zoning, in codes, so that it stays there? I think places are like people, and they impact our lives, but places do not talk back to us. So we never know what was lost there, or what was gained there. So having people build these memories about their childhood, yeah, it was the maple leaves in Canada that I loved. Well, maybe that's what you need to look for in your future, in your new plan, having more trees. So people need to realize what these values are, what the details are, and how they can look for that in the future. If you lose it, you don't know what you lost. How can you find it again? So people need to reflect back and think, what are the values that we had in this community? Might be for Latinos, it might be public space. So how do we build another plaza somewhere else? We have a question back here. Yeah, well, I think when people build, for instance, when people build their favorite childhood memories, no matter where you are in the world, it's always the same values. It's gonna be nature. Either you're gonna climb the rock to Central Park, or you're gonna play in the snow in Minnesota, or are you going to play in the leaves in Connecticut? It's always nature. It's always physical activity. So I think that for children, the mind and the body is connected. It's always physical, and children are always looking for a more complex environment. Might be children always build forts because they want to see a more complex environment, and that's part of what children need and do. So you kind of start seeing, and people, or it's also having dinner with family and friends, being part of a group or being part of a place. These are kind of like baseline values that you see across the board as children. So it could be in India, it could be in China, it could be in Mexico, it could be in the U.S. or Europe. So you start to see these kind of baseline ideas or values that all children have.
So during these like participatory events, like I see like it's a lot of like learning more from the public. Like how do you find yourself going and educating them at the same time? Because you don't want to just post a map on there like numbers and whatnot. I'm just thinking about like how on top of that do you sit there and while you're encouraging these people to think, you're educating them about like the actual topic that they're in there for.
Yeah, well, I think it's more about them educating themselves, that how all their own values, all their own processes all their own reach have value. If like as a transportation planner, if I go into the community and say you need to bike and walk more, they'll say, well, who are you to tell me what to do? But if they invent biking and walking in their neighborhood, look what I invented. Fine, they did it themselves, and they tell us why they do it. So it's kind of reversing the table where they're educating us on what they want to do, rather than us. And I think that's a problem that a lot of advocates have. Advocates say, "Okay, I'm a bike advocate, and therefore you need to bike more." Well, I don't think I should do that. But if people come up with their own conclusions about biking, then it's a lot more powerful.
That's it? All right. Well, every time you go out there and you tell somebody you're into planning, usually the answer is, what's planning? And I think the answer is, do you remember when you were 5 years old and you were playing in the mud? That's what we do at Lane, slightly higher level. So, thank you very much, James. Thank you very much.